There is no witty intro, there is no preceding question to start, there's not even really a challenge. Today we are engaging in the harrowing journey of Fallout 2 as a pony from My Little Pony. This will be an adventure of ups and downs, love and love lost, saving and loading, and most importantly, fuck, I got myself into a state of the game where I am now soft locked. So now I have to reset the whole run when I am barely at the end. This is Fallout 2 as Gold Ship from Uma Musume. Before I started the run, I will say that I had done some research into the character I am trying to play for this run, and I have to say I will not be using this research to a T. The main problem I am running into is that the character that was built in the Fallout Equestria experience was not really an early Fallout game character, seemingly more of a Fallout New Vegas character. This can be seen in things like the character's stats. They can only go to 100, and one of them is just called Firearms, which I can only equate to something like New Vegas's gun skill. So for this reason, the challenge piece that this research brings is that I will have to level 5 different skills to at least 100. These skills are Sneak, as there is no such thing as Stealth, Science, Lockpicking, Big Guns, and Small Guns. Sneak will practically be a dump skill that I will have to level up, while these other skills will actually be useful. However, this is not the only part of the challenge. On top of these skill picks, I have devised something quite horrible, a bingo card. To spice things up, I will be trying my best to get a bingo on a random bingo card generated from a website. These are the goals I have determined to use, but I will only go over them whenever they appear. There are some that I want to highlight as a demonstration. Some of these bingo squares are just silly things I want to do, like horse sex, the Enclave call, or irradiate the pony. But others are quite challenging, like kill a Deathclaw with your bare hooves, or do the uranium mine quest without power armor. One specifically is just a bullshit square that I would have to complete if I wanted a specific bingo in the form of leveling throwing to 150%. Throwing may not necessarily be bad, but wasting this many skill points is just a tragedy when there are 5 skills that I have to level to 100%. With the explanations out of the way, I'll say that I already rolled. Then, as the intro suggests, I failed entirely in the first run and had to do a new run all the way over again. The original card I rolled was 51, as shown here, but then I re-rolled and I got the reverse of 51, which is 15. So this is the bingo card we are starting with here. As with all Fallout 2 runs, the run starts with the character creation screen. Under normal circumstances, one can never play as a pony in Fallout 2, but with the power of mods, link in the description, anything is possible. Being a pony doesn't affect gameplay at all, but it's fun to play goofy mods in video games, and I'm glad Fallout 2 isn't left out from this. My tag skills were the 3 non-combat skills I explained in the research portion. In the run proper, I would have to hard level small guns and big guns, but this really wouldn't turn out to be an issue. I picked Gifted as my important trait and Bloody Mess as my funny trait, so that I could harken back to old school YouTube with cute animals and extremely visceral scenarios. I actually just regularly pick this so that I can see the cool death animations. Now, I will say that I have never played Uma Musume or bet on a Japanese horse race, so I had no idea what character from either of those I would pick. I was trying my best to remember from the VTubers I watched what one of the characters was called, and accidentally first thought of Goldfinger, which turned out to be a 007 flick, which then made me think of Goldmember, who is a character from a parody of a 007 flick. I eventually figured out that the character's name was Goldship, so I went with that. And with that, I could finally begin the game. Rather than talk about the beginning of this run, I thought I would go over some of the things in this run that will probably be important. The first thing I want to say is that this is of course a mod. This mod is inspired by the Fallout Equestria fanfiction, which I have no real knowledge of. I will be including the mod page in the description for this so you can try it out, obviously, as I said before. The other thing is that I'm using another mod, and possibly others, that impacts the beginning of this run, which is the starting items based on skill levels mod. I will be putting this mod in the description too, but know that I ditched the starting items at the beginning of the game, including the ordinary starting weapon, the spear. The next thing I want to go over is the specifics behind the bingo card. Some things on this bingo card are simple like horse porn, but others might be a bit more vague, and some are even impossible. One that may be confusing is the critical radiation pony mission, which I later dictate to mean the second to last radiation sickness level. I'll go over that more later. An example that was actually impossible was getting addicted to alcohol, which I had to retrain later into just drinking a large amount of alcohol. Strangely enough, the developers of Fallout 2 made the alcohol addiction but never implemented it into the game, as in they have the assets and effects programmed, but didn't put it in. Kinda weird, huh? Anyways, the beginning is not really too interesting. The only thing remotely interesting is that I learned a new technique that if you kill all the mobs in the beginning, you can level before fighting your fellow tribesmen in hand-to-hand combat. All you have to do is just use some doctor skill right beforehand. That's really it though. Since this wasn't my first time attempting this run, I wasn't playing games anymore. All the gloves had come off. I was beelining straight for San Francisco to get the coordinates for Navarro and rushing to get the Enclave power armor. This turned out to simply take a long time to do. I didn't really have any difficulty actually getting the power armor when I rolled the good RNG to get into Navarro unscathed. One funny thing that I will say is that I ended up getting into Navarro without upsetting any of the people working for the Enclave, so when I get back here much later, the guards there were none the wiser. One thing I will say also is that whenever I was doing the research for this, I was considering making it to where I can't use power armor at all in this run, but then I thought, nah, that's kind of difficult actually, so we are going to use the power armor. And in fact, I made one of the bingo squares, Pony and power armor. The reason why that I would not use power armor is because the character apparently never used power armor, but also the character used a bunch of armor that was kind of stronger than power armor in some cases, so confusing, right? I went ahead and did the usual song and dance for getting the Vertibird Plans, and got some good stuff out of the lockers, but more importantly, I could already knock off one of the bingo card squares, with that being the horse and power armor square. I also made sure to mark the free spaces, which is an oversight from me not changing the middle square to free horse. My bad. Don't worry, I get multiple bingos in this run. With the Vertibird Plans in hand, I returned to San Francisco to claim a ton of XP. I'll also say that I have horse robs 20 times, which I did not rule out saves coming for, but if I were to do a future bingo card, I should probably rule that out. I mention it now because the San Francisco merchants are prime locations to steal from, and I regularly stole from them. After making my character functionally immune to all lowly enemies and functionally siding with the she and not the Hebologist, I went to Vault City to try to quash a challenge on the bingo card that I failed in the first run. In the first run, which I failed like an imbecile, I had only one square incentive to do, which was the Join Vault City by Killing Ghouls challenge square. But this run was different. I had a whole 2 squares to fill in by doing this quest. But guess what happened? I did research on how to do this quest without fucking it up because I didn't want to repeat the first run's failure. And it turns out that this is where I learned it was actually impossible to get a Vault City citizenship by killing all the ghouls. It turns out that even if you do complete the task from the first citizen of Vault City, you don't really get anything. To clarify what I mean by this, I will identify how one can interpret killing the ghouls of Gecko to mean. Thinking literally first, this would mean killing all the ghouls. I didn't want to do this yet because I had the Win 10 Tragic the Garnering game square that I wanted to complete first, which required gambling to do easily. Thinking along the lines of the reactor quest, there was shutting down the reactor, which actually makes Lynette mad at you and turns all of Vault City against you. Wanting to get the quest done early for early experience, I chose the morally good option of just helping the ghouls with their reactor and getting a Vault City citizenship from McClure. This means that I would fail to do both of these squares. The funny thing is with Lynette too is that you can talk to her and tell her that you solved the problem, and you can just get bonus experience from that, I believe. Okay, no, actually you don't get any experience. Turns out, my bad. You don't even get experience for telling her, but you can tell her that you solved the quest without telling her that you did anything over there. You kind of can pull the rug over her eyes a little bit. At least I could get the Enclave call when I fixed the reactor, which was one of my squares. This did get me to think about more squares that I could make in a future bingo card, though, like installing the Gecko reactor part without using the robot, which I actually tried to do but failed because of the skill requirement. Because I largely did this in a normal way, I won't go over this quest any longer. Upon getting citizenship, I made sure to go into Vault 8 to get the voice module and the knowledge of functionally nothing, because I already know where every location is in this game. I went ahead and marked the 2 squares I wasn't getting with a red X, but didn't do this in the future because I thought this represented more that I would never be able to do those. These would be the only ones I wouldn't even consider anymore. I was under the impression that since my previous run's card had the Lose the Car in Enclave Territory square, my character would have it too because there are so few challenges, so I made my way to get the car. I already had the car part, so it was a simple matter of getting the car part installed. I had no trouble doing any of this. The past few parts of the game haven't really required too many good weapons, so I decided to start souping up my weaponry. I needed to do quests first to get my combat stats up, and by this point I had a good amount of big guns. I did the usual stealing from the San Francisco merchants song and dance to get my weapons I needed. It was around this time that I realized I didn't have the Lose My Car square, so I had to do a reload after losing it in Enclave territory. This burden was fine for me. The car was a wonderful mechanic for me to have because my game was not suffering from the weird bug where the overworld is really fast to traverse. I always made sure to leave it in a place other than New Reno for the simple fact that I didn't want to do the "dude, where's my car" one-time quest to get it back. That was probably an unnecessary decision. Upon having my weaponry and keeping the car, I decided to kill more people to gain more experience. I decided to join the NCR Rangers. This would be a way to test out how good my equipment was with little difficulty. The slavers fell really quickly, and the slaves were freed even quicker due to my science being over 100. Then I decided to head towards Broken Hills on a whim when suddenly I was graced by the presence of the Monty Python bridge reference. I had the square to get the question wrong because I had never gotten the question wrong, and I did so after making a new save. After the gratuitously gory death I experienced, I reloaded my game until I could get the questions that made the bridge keeper die just so I could get his cloak. I never ended up using this cloak. It was still great to get the square filled kind of early, but the more important thing is that this run revealed to me that there are a plethora of Monty Python references in this game. None of my bingo parts required Broken Hills, but this was a rather complete playthrough, so I went through this place to further round out the run. In my last run, there was actually a square that involved this place, and I did do it, so it actually turned out to not be that bad. But there is in fact squares that could have involved Broken Hills. Little did I know that this area would be more like a gateway into New Reno. The first thing I did was test my metal against a drug-enhanced rad scorpion. Failing to best the bug, the next thing I did was go into an old ghoul's home and give him a cat's paw magazine, and then he asked for a blow-up doll. I instantly made my way to New Reno. Then I instantly tried to be a porn star. I actually started my character off with a bunch of charisma thinking that it was the only thing I needed to be a porn star, but the porn star lifestyle is far more demanding than I expected. The player needed to pass a formula to make a porno, as well as do a special task to unlock the quest. Until then, all I could do was be a fluffer. I decided to hold off on that and instead do some quests for the local organizations. I only worked with 2 of the groups, with the first one being the Mordinos just so I could unlock talking with Myron. The first and second quests with the Mordinos are super simple fetch quests. The second quest does unlock the porn quest, but I didn't have the stats for it yet. The final quest for the Mordinos is pretty much just a slaughter quest, but it turned out that I didn't want to be a made man, the title a player gains for working with one of the families, or the Mordinos. I would end up killing the Salvatores, but not turning in the quest to Big Jesus. Weird to say Jesus, and Jesus feels more correct than saying Big Jesus. This is where I pivoted to working for the Wrights. The Wrights are a special family to join because they make you go to a secret location for one of their quests. It was actually a bit of a bumpy ride to do the quests for the Wrights for my character in this run. It wasn't so bad in the previous run. For the first quest, I didn't have enough points in intelligence and struggled to find mentats to artificially raise the stat, so I tried to do the quest the morally wrong way of digging out the victim's grave, but it turned out that I needed a shovel for that, which I didn't have. With that failed, I scoured the land for mentats everywhere. I went to Broken Hills, New California Republic, and finally ended up finding them in San Francisco only after encountering another cool Monty Python reference, the Spammer event, and opening up the Mariposa military base. The mentats would finally allow me to do the first quest for the Wrights in the easiest way, which was just talking to a few NPCs. Then I could finally go to the Sierra Army Depot. This location is another pop culture reference that gives an incredibly powerful bonus to the player. It's kind of like how some of the universes beyond Magic the Gathering sets actually had good cards. The thing the player gets here is a powerful companion depending on their science stat. While my science was still not quite up to snuff, I figured the robots inside of Sierra Army Depot would be a sufficient amount of experience to get my stats there. I'm going to take this time doing things inside the location to explain why I am here and how I am doing it. This location contains a powerful companion called Skynet. This run does not disallow companions. In fact, far from it. One square actually requires an animal team, 3 or more, which, as the name suggests, means having 3 or more animals in your party, including yourself. Skynet is possibly one of the best companions in the game because he can heal himself to full instantly when outside of combat, and stays out of the way during fights because you can equip him with small guns, which includes the best small gun, the Gauss rifle. To most effectively acquire this companion, the player has to have a science level of 125% at minimum, which was luckily one of the main skills of Little Pip in lore. I already had a bunch, but not quite enough. The robots in here did prove to give me enough experience to level and bump my science skill up enough past that threshold. So now I had the most powerful version of Skynet the player could attain, but no weapon to equip him with. With no weapon in Skynet's hands, I was determined to fill them. I became a made man with the rights, were satisfied with just knowing that the Sierra Army Depot was open, and unlocked the special weapons that Eldridge at the new Reno Arms sells. I didn't really buy anything too special, but I was lucky to get a sniper rifle from Eldridge. The sniper rifle was a good weapon for Skynet because I used the same bullets as the sniper with my Bozar. The problem is that there was a bug for equipping weapons that made him not equip it. I'd only find out how to fix this a bit later, but it also wouldn't matter too much for now since I didn't encounter any real combat scenarios. Instead, I encountered another amazing Monty Python reference that was a continuation of the previous one. The Brotherhood of Steel Knights, referencing the Knights of the Round Table, were fighting a Vorpal rat, referencing the Rabbit of Caer Banog. In the fight, there was a cave that held the Holy Hand Grenade, which I think I was supposed to use, but I ended up just watching the Knights try their best. The silly part is that the Knights eventually won without it. I got to keep the Holy Hand Grenade. Sadly, I forgot about it completely in this run afterward, and just let it rot in my inventory. After this, I did the Uranium Mine quest in Broken Hills with my power armor because I didn't have that square as I explained earlier, and also did the other quests in the town for more unnecessary good pony points. The only funny part here was that I decided to just use my hooves to kill all the things in my way. This is also where I figured out the fix for Skynet not using their weapons. You just have to change the combat behavior of the companion to fix the companion not using their weapons, in case you have issues with them not using weapons you give them. This would actually happen more than once in the playthrough. With the thick, creamy praise from Marcus, I decided to finally go over to Vault 15. Vault 15 was a pretty basic run-through in this playthrough, so I'm going to bitch about something else I struggled with throughout this run. All throughout the run I have had pretty bad RNG, but especially at the middle to end parts of the run. I would randomly get killed by a ton of things while also missing a ton of point-blank shots. This was especially true here in Vault 15. The funny thing is that I had Pariah Dog early in the first attempt of this run, and that reached a boiler point of an awful experience that I hard killed Pariah Dog at some point. The big thing I especially need to point out is that I have a luck of 9. 9. And yet my luck was horrible. Later it would even go up to 10 and my luck was horrible. If you're wondering why I had so much luck, I wanted high gambling for something later, as well as one of the squares. The one I mentioned earlier, Tragic the Garnering. Anyways, Vault 15 was a simple go-through, but I did try to kill as many cons as possible in this part. After killing Darian, I turned in the stuff from there to the NCR for more experience, and then decided to head to Redding for one of the bingo squares. I did more than just the bingo square of killing all the aliens in Redding. Much more, in fact. I started off by doing every single deputy quest that I could do, which was all of them. That was a nice bit of experience and a meaningless amount of money. And then I headed into the mines to clear out the Wanamingos. To deem the bingo squares complete, the only marker for success I used was the game telling me the mine was empty. I got to recall just how in-depth the mines really were in this part of the game, with how many twisting paths and hiding Wanamingos the mine had. But I easily cleared the place out, earning me the square. I also turned in the excavator chip to the woman. I didn't even think about who should get the chip by listening to the different groups. I just chose the woman. This wasn't a preference in any way. I just went to the first one I saw. If you want a bullshit reason that doesn't have anything to do with anything, Little Pip is canonically a lesbian. After Redding, I decided to just do more errands. This would include trying to become a porn star again and failing, going to Dr. Troy in Vault 8, and killing the slavers in the den. Killing the slavers in the den was the last group of slavers I would consider for the Emanciponi Proclaponi. Why the fuck did I call this square to be filled in? There were the slaves in New Reno and Vault City that existed too, but they couldn't be freed as far as I could tell. So this is as far as I could go with this square. Killing the slavers also unlocked Vic, who I had to babysit for a bit while I went to get the Gek from Vault 13. I already had the voice module from much earlier, so this was a cinch to complete. Then I decided to get more ammunition from San Francisco because it was nearby, which is where babysitting Vic became harder, but not hard enough to really mention the specifics. Having a car is so overpowered for encounters. The babysitting ended when I got my next square, which was leaving Vic in the Enclave Base. This was a funny idea for me because Vic really seems like the type of companion that is not capable of doing much if the player doesn't invest time into him, like I was doing. Vic actually turns out to be one of the few NPCs that has like 6 stages of levels, so he's pretty good if you keep him the entire time, but we didn't do that. Coming here would also serve the double purpose of getting canines so that I could build up my animal team. I didn't take this time to clear out the base yet though, due to being still a little squishy. I left for Arroyo to find that it was torn apart like all other playthroughs of Fallout 2, and then it was time for more important dealings. At this point in the playthrough, I subtly set up for finally completing the most important square on the whole bingo card, horse porn. I had Kama Sutra Master, which is something you have to get as one of your perks, a bunch of charisma, and most importantly, used my brain to realize I should have just used buff out to up my endurance. Now I was ready to make a pornography. I went to the Golden Globes, talked to the owner, and passed the horny check, which all amounted to the low reward of 500 caps. But it was all worth it to get the bingo square and also get the title of Lady Chatterfly. I went through the entire list of names that I could pick, and thought that the one that was closest to being a My Little Pony name would be that one. Finally being a star, I decided to go gambling in an attempt to get the other square in Reno, which was losing 40,000 caps. I will say here that I kind of cheated the square a little bit. While I could have gone to San Francisco and waited for money to appear in the shop inventories to rob them until I had 40,000 caps, I just decided for simplicity that caps that I gained and then lost would count as being lost. Plus I had a good bit of gambling skill at this point, which wasn't enough to profit, but definitely enough to make losing 40,000 caps annoying. Now if you want to know the premier technique in making your character gamble at hyper fast speeds, all you have to do is have a keyboard with a numpad and use both hands to push all 5 of the first 5 numbers. This game is weird when it comes to inputs, so it does all of them at once, which means the player is gambling every possible amount of money at the same time really fast. I don't want to use the terminology of per in-game tick here because that's incorrect. It really is just that the inputs are being put in instantly. I sat at the dealer's table for a good few minutes before deciding I had lost enough and took the bingo square. After those legendary feats, sans one that I wish I had on my bingo card in the form of getting 1 million caps, I decided to round out my animal team. I would hire Gorus, an intelligent albino deathclaw, but probably more aptly the death of me because I think Gorus had the most anti-synergy with the way I played. I was functionally only using the Bozar in this run. The only times I fired other guns were entirely just so I could get the fire 20 different guns bingo square. What this means for Gorus is that anytime he ran into the line of fire, I would probably one-shot him. You also cannot change Gorus off of aggressive mode, so I could not turn off his fervor to die by my hand. This was exacerbated when I took him into Mariposa military base to wipe out the rest of the mutants there. I loaded so many times because of the amount of times I killed him by accident. At this point, I thought I needed my companions to level up. With a ton of quick saving and quick loading, by some miracle I managed to clear out the second floor of the Mariposa military base without killing my companions, while floor 3 took fewer loads. Then I had to do floor 4, which was a little interesting. In case you do not know, floor 4 is a bit of a boss rush in the sense that there is a super mutant that summons a bunch of mutant abominations, those only being deathclaws, fire geckos, floaters, and mutated mole rats. He doesn't keep on summoning them forever though. The name of the game is to kill Melchior, the super mutant, before clearing out all the mutant creatures. His deathclaws were worse than I thought, but I eventually did succeed in an attempt where I was a bit luckier. This was sincerely a part of where my RNG was bullshit because I missed so many point-blank shots on the deathclaws, and they got so many criticals on me. With my success in defeating this boss in the game, I could mark off finishing off the Master's old base on my bingo card and claim the Gauss pistol from the area. After the Mariposa military base, I had it. I was done trying to level up these companions. I decided to just leave my whole party at the tanker for the end of the game and started doing other things. One of those things was level heavily. With no companions to impede me, I could just fight the random encounters, including the centaur/floater encounters that were tantamount to a ton of experience. I also fought some Morton brothers, who each had free weapons for me to take. They really weren't super noteworthy. After dicking around for a bit, I went to the stables because I wanted to get the Make Myron a Horsefucker square. I made my way to the stables and forgot that the 2 guards there would be mad at me. That didn't stop Myron from thinking that I was the most fuckable thing in the entire wasteland. However, I had a problem, which I didn't really fix. I realized that my character was too smart. I tried many things to get dumber, but the encounter broke in either direction. When I tried to get dumb with mentats, I was too ugly. Trying to go through the dialogue as much as possible didn't work. The thing that probably would have worked, but I forgot to try, was just using Psycho. Either way, I didn't mark that I got the Myron Horsefucker square, but I didn't rule it out either. This was because I didn't know whether it would count for the square if Myron fantasized about it. I eventually just settled with taking him with me. Myron is actually just a means to get more experience. When you get him in your group, you get experience. When you convince him that there is a jet antidote, you get experience. And when you get him to fuck you, it probably gives you experience. In any case, I did a funny thing and decided to go back to Vault City to Doc Troy, who I already gave jet to a while ago. He gave me a jet antidote, and Myron didn't bat an eye. This is why I didn't destroy Vault City, by the way. Let me talk more about jet while I turn in the jet antidote to Redding. Jet is probably the most annoying drug in Fallout 2. In Fallout 2, there are only a handful of drugs, and they all have a 20% chance to make the player addicted. Additionally, the addictions practically instantly wear off just by traveling. Jet is special. Jet addiction happens at 50% chance, and never wears off. I learned this the hard way in the first attempt when I got addicted from the first hit of jet. You have to get jet antidote, which becomes exceedingly easy after you get the first one. The funny thing also about jet is that it can't make your NPCs addicted. There's no such thing as an NPC addiction, so you can just give them jet and they will always have 2 additional AP. Getting the first one requires you to have the Vault City doctor make it though. After doing the Redding quest, I went on a small excursion with Myron to get a bit of experience. I thought he could be a good companion because of his lean into energy weapons, but he needed to be leveled up a bunch. I still tried to use him on my team. I left him with my other companions in the tanker and continued my journey. Around this time, I was just trying to fill in the simpler squares, starting with the horse robberies. I was just stealing from the same 2 merchants in San Francisco because they were easy to rob and had a ton of money. I actually got 20 robberies before Myron, but the more important part was that I was done trying to make money from stealing. By the time I left Myron in the tanker, I was super good at gambling. So I took my left hand and my right hand and I went to the casino in New Reno. What you're going to want to do if you want to have infinite money is take your keyboard that has a the same thing I was saying, but just this time we actually have 120% gambling. Which at 120% gambling and 9 luck, I was easily making more than I was losing. And after a few minutes, I was up to more than $200,000. This would have gone on longer if I had the make 1 million caps square, but learning the new tech of pushing all the number keys at once was a great thing to know. After this, I got a bit more ammo and decided to knock out something else involving gambling. It turns out that winning in Magic the Gathering is just a gamble because the gambling skill in Fallout 2 determines your chance of winning in Magic the Gathering. I decided to knock out the square in a rather small amount of time, and then I could do another thing that involved the ghouls and gecko. I was still not aware of the fact that there was no alcohol addiction in Fallout 2, so I purchased a ton of Gamma Gulp beer and some Rowan Gen rum. After drinking quite a bit, I was wondering why the addiction wasn't triggering, so I looked it up to realize this disappointment. I would just retcon the alcohol addiction square to say drink a bunch of alcohol later, but the specific beer of Gamma Gulp would turn out to be helpful. It turns out that you can just hold a button here to purchase hundreds of the drink. After having over 200 Gamma Gulp beer, I left for San Francisco to drink them all. Now I can explain why I would do this. One of the squares I had on the bingo card was Get Critical Radiation Sickness, which I had no idea what meant at this time. I wrote these all thinking that they would be just things I could do, and looking up this one showed me that I could do it. The Enclave is a group of dumbasses in this game because there is no way in hell that the people of the Waste are really that irradiated. Radiation in this game works by the player gaining an amount of radiation from 0 to 1000. At 1000, the player is functionally going to die without drugs, but you would be hard-pressed to reach 1000 rads. To explain how hard this was, I went throughout the wasteland trying to get the mobs to irradiate me, like the aliens, and I think also the centaurs and floaters can do it, but I feel like they mostly just poisoned me. But they barely scratched the radiation meter, even if it says a larger dose of radiation is inflicted to the player. There are not a ton of locations that actually irradiate the player, especially if they have power armor, which they probably will. So I think it is generally something the player will have to strive for if they want to reach what I deem to be critical radiation, which is 600 to 999. The best way that I found was drinking Gamma Gulp beer. Each hit of Gamma Gulp beer gave 2 radiation, and they were easier to buy than Roentgen rum, which gives 3 radiation. So in San Francisco, I sat in front of the shops and drank over 200 beers. This is where I found out about the cherry on top for trying to die by radiation. Even if the player gets a massive amount of radiation sickness, apparently they can randomly get better. Getting radiation sickness is more of like a temporary debuff on the player in Fallout 2. Either way, I could mark off drinking a bunch of alcohol and getting critical radiation sickness after seeing my stats drop by a bunch. To explain the debuff thing some more, the reason why I figured that out is because I was trying to wait for the effects to happen, and then I apparently waited too long and I lost my radiation sickness. Crazy, right? The next square I set my eyes upon was clearing out the Enclave Base. Now when I say this, there may be some confusion about which one I am talking about. I am very much referring to the Navarro base since the player has to wipe out the oil rig in the story, and wiping out the base simply means to kill all the Enclave members there. And the turrets, I guess. Arriving at the base, I was surprisingly still not despised by the people there. I guess I still hadn't gotten caught by any of the Enclave by this point. I decided to fuck around a bit and try to get some experience out of dialogue, learning things like the guy who gossips and the non-science way of getting into the computer. I also learned about the speech check, which I failed to get the fob. Then the carnage started. Sergeant Dornan told me off and I snapped. I started with the people underground because it would serve as a double purpose of getting the fob, but then I moved on to killing the people on the top. I spent a ton of time quick saving and quick loading at this point because my attack RNG was so bad. The most important thing to realize here is that I had 190% big guns, which was something that I had for a long while at this point, and still missed a ton of shots. If you're wondering how I got big guns so high, I used the tag skill thing, obviously. I used tag to just double it. I also had 1 level of more criticals and 9 luck, but I could still not hit that many criticals. My damage low rolled regularly and so on and so forth. Yap, bad RNG. I wouldn't say clearing out this place was hard, but it did take a long time to get the good RNG. One obvious thing I did to make things easier was take the location out in parts by saving after clearing out groups. I was trying my best not to save scum too much, but definitely failed that premise. After around 40 minutes of killing Enclave members weak and strong, I was finally done and Vic had the whole place to himself. After the Navarro debacle, I decided to try to complete a few more errands, like getting more ammo and stuff. In these moments, I want to say that I actually didn't get too much ammo. These were more like times where I was offloading equipment and buying whatever FMJ 223 ammo the merchant had. The great purchasing of equipment wouldn't happen until much later. The next thing I want to mark off my bingo card was the fire 20 different guns square, and I thought that just going to a weaker area would give me the chance to do this. I was keeping track of the guns I fired throughout the playthrough, and I was getting close to finished. So I went to the raider camp to get guns I didn't already fire. None of the raiders could hurt me, so they ended up being free experience in the face of my Bozar. I got a few guns I didn't fire already and decided to turn in the Raiders Journal to Vault City. When counting which guns were fired, I made sure that I only counted guns that hit enemies in this run. After turning in the book, I headed to the last location I hadn't gone to yet, which was Modoc, just to get the experience points from the small quests there. Modoc would turn out to be more, however. I pretty quickly did the Ghost Farm quest, and then I did a few odd jobs until running into Miria. I don't know why I did this, but I quick loaded to get Miria to have sex with me. Then we got married. Miria is a companion that the player cannot get rid of without extenuating circumstances or death, so I had to take her along for the ride. After doing a few more things in Modoc, I decided to leave with her to the tanker to start the end game. She wouldn't leave the party, so I had her kit up with power armor instead and took her into the undercarriage of the ship. Here, I would fire the final gun I had to fire for the 20 guns challenge while turning on the navigational computer. I have to issue a correction here. I actually didn't already have the navcom parts, and nor did I already save Badger's girlfriend. I was looking at the recording, and I think I got a little confused. But I actually didn't do it in the order that I said it in the script. So just know that I did the navcom part first. Or no, then I did the Badger's girlfriend first, and then I did the navcom part afterwards, because I had to go get the navcom part with Miria. So, to summarize, Badger's girlfriend, then navcom parts. I think I just got confused because I was looking at so much footage that I had assumed that I had already done something, but actually no, I didn't. My mistake. Then, as I was going to the She to get the oil the hard way of killing the Habologists, I realized that I had already taken every Fallout 2 drug that was available, so I marked that one off. After easily killing all the Habologists, I was allowed to talk with the She's ChatGPT Emperor and prompted him to give me oil so that I could start the end of the game. With my party of Miria, Myron, Goris, and Skynet, I figured that I could at least have a dog by the end of the game. I rode the PMV Valdez to the oil rig and went through a ton of rooms with much difficulty, my RNG really acting up here, until deciding that I needed to really kit up for the oil rig. Another thing that happened was that I fucked up the science kill Frank Horrigan square, so loading a save from before leaving for the oil rig was an excellent decision. I took my whole group with me to try to level them up. They got to watch the first thing I did to set up, which was really show that the house actually always loses. I gambled my way up to $400,000 to buy more things for the oil rig. I kitted up Myron with power armor. I filled my inventory with a ton of bullets and stimpaks. I even bought a Vindicator minigun because of how powerful I thought it was when the Enclave used it. Hell, I even went back into Enclave territory just to get more experience, only to be rewarded better with the fact that they carried YK32 pulse pistols, which Myron could use. One thing that didn't really come to fruition was upping the levels of my companions. They were just too hard to practically level. They all would still die by the power of the Bozar, especially Gorus, and I would eventually just give up on trying to do this. Clearly companions need to be carried throughout playthroughs to use them effectively, which I didn't do. All of this setup, sans actually leveling my companions, led up to finally actually starting and completing the endgame. I'm going to commentate room by room the experience of the oil rig for this run. I came into the oil rig with my exact same team as before, with some obviously being by force, and stumbled into the first room on the south. The first room the player enters at the very beginning would be important later, so we'll talk about it later. I was pretty much going the same way I did the first time, except this time I had over 100 stimpaks and functionally endless bullets. The first room is a rather simple room with many of the enemies immediately attacking the player and their party. I had a party in this run, so I couldn't do anything covert with my advanced power armor. I pretty much did what the Enclave would do, come in shooting. For the oil rig, I decided that if a companion dies, they die, and that came quickly with Gorus dying incredibly fast. I really went in on big guns in this playthrough rather than small guns, so I was still as always using the Bozar, who made quick work of my own friend. I could have let all my companions, except for Miria, remain at the beginning of the oil rig, but I thought it would be more fun to just have them join me in my attempts to fight fully armored, final tier weapon-wielding men and women who had RNGesus on their side. Or at least it would have been if the next room in this sequence didn't exist. After clearing out the room where my tribe was imprisoned and resting for literal days on the oil rig, just to heal everyone, I decided to head towards the next southern room, which was the shocking floor room. This room is literally the anti-companion room. The really problematic thing is that the room has things in it that are important for the player to collect, so my first go-through had to be a quick go-through to get my companions across, and then I had to go back in. What really made me kick myself later is that I looked up the room online just recently and learned that my character had the skills to do something special to the room. It turns out that the electric room is a very special room in the grand scheme of Fallout 2. If the player has certain stats, the room just grants you a special reward based on those stats, and for me it would have been that all the doors open. After getting everyone but Miria to the other side, Miria predictably died when I went back to get the better power armor and the second Gek. None of the Enclave here are armed, so they proved to be no contest for me to kill. In the next room, the room where the president resides, I was greeted by the guards, who I knew instantly power level wise, so I tried to play things safe and do a kind of turtling tactic. I used the area with the stairs to try to make the enemies waste their vast supply of action points, but that didn't stop them from critting and one-shotting me from full health with their combination of Vindicator minigun and Gauss rifle. Eventually I did make it through them and the turret behind them and the additional guards behind them that heard the whole thing go down. This room might honestly be one of the worst rooms in the entirety of Fallout 2. Anyways, at some point, Myron is killed here by the Enclave, but honestly, he was probably pretty expendable because he dies regardless of the player's attempts to keep him alive. I also killed the president in this room without even talking to him because I wanted to get the drop on the robots in the northern part of the room. This would enable me to get the key card, which would be a handy little tool for getting the last bingo square I get in this run. After clearing out the room rather easily this time, surprisingly, I went back through to the beginning to see if I missed anything with the terminal since I did have the presidential key card, and more importantly I talked to the village elder. I will have something to say about this later. For now, know that I didn't really find out anything interesting, and went to the next room in sequence. The room full of power armor people. This room was really sucky for me, and it had been a while since I had beaten it without being covert. But things shaped up well when I figured out that if you start in the important room with the scientists and go outward, the crowd is much more manageable. Clearing out the area of the power armor enemies is the brunt of this part, so after I did that, things were fine. I did lose Skynet in this part though, which was the only companion I really cared about, leaving me alone for the rest of the oil rig. I cleared out the rest of the room of the other NPCs, and then got lost on what I was to do next. It had been a while since I had beaten Fallout 2, so I didn't realize until a bit later that I was supposed to blow up the computers. This did give me the chance to explore the other room that I didn't see yet, and I was completely allowed to go wherever I wanted because I lost my companions. Eventually, I did figure out that I had to blow up the computers to blow up the oil rig, but it was really tedious to get the explosive to do so. With the computers destroyed, I could go through the rest of the oil rig the fast way directly to the final boss, Frank Horrigan. I had no companions, no convinced Enclave members, and no special know-how in how to beat Frank Horrigan. But I did have over 100 science, which meant that I was allowed to use the turrets at the beginning to beat Frank Horrigan. Mr. Horrigan was actually quite tame in comparison to the many other Enclave members I fought, barely actually hitting criticals on me, but still hitting for a ton. To map out how this fight works, if you use the terminal to activate the turrets, they immediately start firing on Frank Horrigan. And then a group of Enclave members, the group of Enclave members you see earlier, who actually hate him, mind you, come in to help him out. I first started by backing up the turrets by firing on Frank Horrigan while they fired too, but easily realized there was a better strategy. Frank Horrigan will not attack the player if the turrets are firing on him, instead opting to kill every single turret first. So the better strategy turns out to be to just protect the turrets from the Enclave members who come in. I didn't keep using this strategy though, and instead of just went in headstrong, and the game rewarded me by granting me insane attack RNG. Finally, 10 luck paid off. I killed off the remaining Enclave members in the room and I could finally leave the oil rig while watching it explode. For some reason, I didn't get my endings and I wasn't able to continue my playthrough. I thought maybe I didn't talk to the village elder, but I'm pretty sure I did whenever I looked into the footage and started editing and writing the script. If anyone has any idea why this happened, feel free to let me know. Here's the final bingo card. I got a few bingos, but not a blackout. Some of the squares on the card definitely needed to be edited to work better with playing Fallout 2. But that's gonna be it for the Fallout 2 as a pony run. Join me next time as I play Fallout Tactics as a solo Deathclaw, which will be way harder than Fallout 2 as a pony. Josen, is that a horse? And she has a car? I need to lay off the Brock flower.